Hello, Inge.
Hi.
Now it's like 3 minutes after the previous video, but nobody knows. Huh? um, so I have a nice topic for you,
Okay.
and it will be an easy topic. So, like in 5 minutes, we'll be done with this because I want to talk to you about suffering. Ah, I was kidding, I think. And so, just to give you a sort of an overview, also for whoever is watching, I want to understand like well, what is the function of suffering? Like, why is it there? Are there places where there's no suffering? Is it needed for something? And like in general, very general, how to deal with it. So, if it's okay, like I will start with like the more like the highest thing. Like, um, apparently, like here on Earth, we have the concept of suffering. Like we have that we find things painful or we experience pain. Are there also places like in the universe where this just doesn't exist?
Um, Earth right now is the only place where our type or our understanding of suffering exists. Why? Because it is literally body, mind, spirit, soul. So it is not just facts or happenings that we deal with or that we need to process. There are possibilities for pain in the body, pain in the spirit, pain in the soul for loss. Um, and then there's your mind. Your mind is the bridge between all of them. It complicates the concept of suffering
Okay,
because
before I let you go in that direction, so if I understand correctly, um, it's this something which is very restricted actually, if it's only for Earth.
there is suffering, but not as we as people understand suffering to be.
Okay, does suffering have a function? Is there a
Yes,
reason?
yeah, yes. Originally, suffering, any kind of suffering, whether it's in your mind or in your body, is like a warning of don't go there.
Mhm.
You know, if you don't want to go to jail, you don't steal. You don't, or you don't get caught. Depends on how you look at it. The function is you could like a brake, brakes on a car. It's a little warning.
Mhm.
It's the purpose of being able to feel pain. It's also a warning. Sometimes it's difficult to understand that, but imagine someone who has a neurological problem where they cannot feel pain. They're always in danger. There are cases like that.
Mhm.
So, pain we are experiencing as suffering. Wow, I burned my finger. Wow, I'm suffering. You have pain. But if you didn't have that, then what would happen? Serves a function. When you look, quote unquote, at the literal sense of suffering, okay? When you look at world suffering, then that's a whole different spectrum because that involves the mind, not just the body. World suffering, it's sort of like difference between physical abuse, mental abuse. However, mental abuse is also physical abuse because the vibration is supported and you have to recover through the body because the mind is reliant on the body. Okay? You can't fix your mind without a body. Same thing, if there's physical abuse, without the mind interacting with reason, you can't fix the body. Could maybe fix it outwardly, but the healing process is greatly impeded. There's been so many studies that some people recover from an illness rapidly. Some people, the same illness, take a long time. And some people from a minor illness don't recover at all. So it seems very far away from the idea of suffering, but it's all connected.
Because, like, I mean, if you say like that suffering is a signal, well, suppose I lose a loved one, and then I'm grieving and I'm suffering. How is this supposed to like be a warning for me or whatever?
Well, for one thing, I could name a whole slew of reasons. One, treat people as if it's the last day that you have, to be kind to them, to understand them, to feel with them. Two, recognize how precious life is. It's precious because it's temporary. Three, use that pain to reflect on how you are living your life. Are you living your life like there's no end? Are you living your life because you recognize that it's limited and you want to be productive? Or are you living your life because it's limited, you want to go wild and crazy while you can? It's a good reason for self-reflection. Any attachment towards a physical body is also temporary. We are more than our organic being. We have the shape we have because of vibrations, etc. When our body dies, we still are here. Therefore, there's a huge industry um, moving on mediums, etc., etc., because we want to believe that there's more to our body. However, how we feel is when we lose a loved one, it's like they're no longer here. So already there's a contradiction. If you believe that there's an afterlife, completely body, mind, spirit, soul, you'll miss a person for a while, then move on and be happy for their release. It's our emotions and our desire not to have anything change that makes us grieve longer than what is necessary for the body. The body also has to adjust, just like your mind and your emotions, they have to adjust to that there's not a physical representation of someone that you love.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So if I rephrase what you were saying, you can check if I understood it correctly. In the example that indeed like somebody dies, it's unavoidable that you will have some form of suffering because you have to adjust, you have to get into some new form, or perhaps it's there actually to help you see something that you weren't seeing before.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And it's however, it's something where you in all cases can get over in principle. Is that true?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So like
the possibility is there.
Yeah, it's not a given. Mm-hmm. So is it then, for example, let's take a very, very painful case, like somebody who loses a child, for example. The people whom I know, whom that happened with, they still, at some points in their life, have pain over this.
Yes.
Is it possible for someone to lose their child and at some point not experience pain anymore about this?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But it may not be easy.
No, for some people, it can stay there for a long time, especially if they don't look at why they still feel the pain, why they still feel the loss.
Mm-hmm.
Most cases where somebody cannot release that feeling of loss is because they don't separate themselves from the child.
Mhm.
You see, it's sort of like an amputation. If your arm is removed, it's very difficult to get over the fact that you don't wish that you had your arm.
Mhm.
But a child is a separate being. It has the same vibration, especially as the mother, for a very long time. That's needed in order for it to accept life. I'm talking with capital L, because you start out with a consciousness and then a bunch of cells. So the vibration it feeds on is actually where it's being kept in the mother. But if a mother identifies as that child as being part of her, like an arm or a foot, when that child dies uh, later, 2, 3, 4 years old, that makes it even harder, or it doesn't come to full term, the whole experience, even biologically, is as if something is removed that is part of her own body. If she can accept that that child was a separate being and its destiny was to be a separate being,
Mhm.
then it might be easier to let go of that pain. There might be missing, but it won't be as painful.
Mhm.
But that's a process. And the person has to be open to accepting that concept, a different point of reference. Basically, people tend to be very protective over their children to a point of ownership. I've looked at children always as differently. I look at children as a gift. They are our responsibility. Whether it's a child that came from our own body or someone else's child, children are a responsibility because they're not capable of taking care of themselves. But they're not property. They don't belong to us. It's not like a chair or a table.
Mhm.
So, in extension, everyone else's child is in fact as important, but we cannot be responsible for 1 million children. We can't do
Mhm.
that. But people emotionally and subconsciously take it very personally when something happens to the child, including death. So remembering that a child is a separate being can can help. But that's a very complicated and a very sensitive movement, Stefan.
Yes, but I'm not here to ask the simple questions to you then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's okay. But
Mhm.
anybody listening, I hope they realize that I understand how sensitive this is, how deep this can go, and how complicated it can be. Sometimes I say things and it's sort of like, wow, it doesn't go deep, but this is a very deep subject because it's biological. It's body, mind, spirit, soul. Once again, it touches every aspect of your being.
Mhm. Yes, and let me also underline that I think the same way.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me talk about a different type of suffering. It's not that we're going to pass all the types of suffering, but just to get
Yeah.
a scratch a little bit of the surface. Suppose something is happening to you, inflicted on you by another human being, like violence or somebody who has control over parts of your life and imposes stuff on you that you don't want. Like that you're like how should we interpret something like this?
Okay. So you mentioned two things. You mentioned sort of violence against the body,
Mhm.
but also suppression by somebody having power over you, saying things about you, uh, that it's not necessarily that they're actually physically hitting you. So it again
Mhm.
is the of the mind emotions, and the body. How should we interpret this? Okay, I'm going to try to keep it short. So I'll give a everyday life version in order to get through this, where it could be helpful, where you keep in mind that it's up to you how deep the pain goes. That's emotional. Okay. If somebody damages you physically, then it depends on how deep is the damage. Is the damage permanently? If they slap you in the face, that's very different than if they cause you a spinal injury, for example. But any and all experiences are in fact an opportunity to rise above it all. Easy? No, absolutely not. I'm almost 65, and if it was easy, I would no longer get angry. I still get angry over stupid things, stupid, silly things. Someone telling a lie. So what? Other people's opportunity to learn how to filter what is truth, what is a lie. So if you can hang on to, this is a moment where I have to walk the talk and work on myself, it will help. Like I said, it will help. Will it always work? No. No, it won't always work. That's part of the human condition. When we're in stress, we tend to forget what we know regarding how we should handle internal processes. Internal processes can also be very, very different than external processes. If somebody at your job is making you feel miserable, you can still take it as a positive for making room for growth. Meanwhile, go look for another job. If they're lying about you, for instance, mistakes you haven't made, collect material. So accepting that there's a positive does not mean allowing it to continue to happen. But it does have a purpose. However, I've written about this. There is suffering, and then there's unnecessary suffering. You know, like the story, the wolf captures the baby, eats him, mother deer is extremely upset. Purpose, the wolf has to feed its family. But then there are people who go trophy hunting and shoot animals because they want a trophy. So what is that? The pleasure they derive is not enough to make it necessary. It's unnecessary suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another category. There's suffering, just being alive. You know, you have to work hard to stay alive. People are usually not aware, but you have to, your whole body has to work, your digestive system has to work very hard, etc., etc. So there are huge differences between unnecessary suffering and just natural suffering.
Okay, so these were like a few examples of like difficult forms of suffering. I also want to go to something that I might call like more accessible form of suffering, like suffering that we inflict upon ourselves, perhaps even like by being in a situation and seeing the situation as something painful while it is not painful. So generically speaking on such things, what would be the best advice one could give or you could give?
Wow. That involves emotional conditioning. Yeah. Could you give me a clear example?
Okay,
Instance,
suppose I am I will have to make it a little bit abstract. You're in your life and there's something which is bothering you. Like for example, you're annoyed by a person, and so the annoyance is inside of you. And so let's make it extreme. There's pain inside of you, and how to deal with something like that, or is there a reason for this? What is going on? Like,
Okay. For that is sort of, yeah, I can explain how I deal with feelings like that. Then we can just sort of scratch the surface on non-personal and observing from a distance. Non-personal, first step, go and see, why does that person annoy you? What is there within that person that annoys you? Then it usually is a behavior or a way, not even something they do, but the way they do that. Then remembering respect for all of creation, respect, can help you continue to observe from a distance. Then, after you've observed the person and have found what it was or is that annoys you about them, go looking yourself. Within, you will find something that is triggered by the person. Usually not your entire system. There's usually a personality aspect within yourself that wants to be protected and feels threatened or is in disagreement with a specific vibration of the other person. Why do I say specific vibration? Because most people aren't all bad. You know, sometimes they annoy you, sometimes they don't. So you can usually find the more complete you are within yourself, that means consciously aware. That's where the completion comes from. The less likely that someone can constantly, continuously, consistently annoy you. Because you will find aspects of that person that trigger and connect to something within you.
mm-hmm.
That's just the way it is. Everything on this earth is connected. Well, actually, everything everywhere is connected. But on earth, it's very direct. And within the same species, it's even more direct.
If I can summarize what you said, in fact, like I heard, like the most important step is actually to wonder why does the person annoy me.
Yes.
And then like the rest is actually up to the situation, up to who you are, who they are.
Yes.
Okay, good. So making it even more concrete, this can, for example, also be if you're annoyed by, for example, politicians or by government or by other organizations. So it's also something that can teach something to yourself. Why are you annoyed?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And those things are a little bit easier to identify because it's already in your mind. It's not personal. You just have an opinion. For instance, you have a huge company and they produce something that you feel is not good. So how you look at them is in judgment of not good. You want to get rid of the company. Start looking at who makes the company, those steps. So when you're looking at politicians or big government bodies at all levels or organizations, could even be a specific church, religion. Instead of looking at what it represents to you and what is, especially these days, available on the news or on the internet, what is it about them that touches you enough to become annoyed or even angry? And then you have to have a second question. What are you going to do about it? There's so many judgments. They don't do this right. They don't do that right. they're this, whatever. But how many people who point fingers actually stop and think, I'm going to do something that works better for Earth, for everyone? People really allow themselves to get worked up and not just annoyed, but angry at movements. I call it a movement, could be anything, religion, politics, could even be a philosophy. They're quickly pulled into that. And then you have like a mob feeling, to the point of what specifically don't you like about them? And what specifically would you be able to appreciate about them? They focus on the negative, and it becomes one picture, very one-sided, instead of looking at it the whole. When you take something and put it in a bigger space, in a bigger picture, in a bigger understanding, it really does become less annoying. And annoying is okay, but don't let it go into anger. But a lot of times annoyance moves you into being unkind, thinking unkind thoughts, words, or even expressing the unkind thoughts in words. It doesn't even stay in your mind. So yeah, annoyance is tricky. It quickly moves into a negative, but annoyance in itself is okay. An opportunity to explore, why are you annoyed, and are you willing to do something about it?
And that's a nice perspective to think that annoyance in itself is not bad. It's okay. I wanted to move away from like the earthly suffering, and then like in the end to talk about a little bit the esoteric things that you mentioned in the beginning that I found very puzzling. That like suffering as we understand it is only on earth. So then I'm wondering, okay, so there it seems to imply there's other type of suffering. Like, does the sun suffer? Or like, what is this outside there? Is it too abstract for us to understand?
No. If we don't zero in on anything specific, we could stay very general. We understand suffering as becoming less, right? Less than ideal. If our feeling is in a less than ideal situation, we consider that already suffering. That's the kind of suffering that is beyond earth. All things material are temporary. So does the sun suffer? Yeah, it's burning up. Does it experience it as suffering as we experience it? No, because it just is. There's function, there's purpose. But if we look at it, a star that's dying, would we consider that suffering? If we were dying, we consider it suffering. Does the star consider itself suffering? No. And, I probably don't want to talk about energetic beings above, outside of Earth, because then it gets complex, and then we probably want to have a specific video or something on that.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else like on this topic that comes to mind for you, like suffering, that you want to add at this moment?
Yes.
Okay.
Understand life. That's the way to stop the suffering as you know it, as you recognize suffering to be today. Look at the cause. Don't look at the symptoms. Suffering is a symptom. It's not a cause.
Okay.
That is it. That was kind of deep.
Well, but it's simple and deep. But it's general too. Okay. Shall we end the video then?
Yes. Till next
Okay.
time.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.